Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Waller's Wallet, and as airline programs move towards dynamic pricing, the opportunity to get oversized value is shrinking. So in this video, I decided to look at a few airline programs to see what their point values are actually worth. Now, if you want a simple way to help out the channel, consider hitting that thumbs up button. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn that bell notification on as well so you don't miss out on future videos. Now, I decided to look at American Airlines, Delta, and United for their values from the big US airlines because they have a dynamic pricing model. So the values are going to vary, but what can you realistically get for values, and can you still get oversized value from these miles? Let's find out. Now, I didn't include programs like JetBlue and Southwest here because those values are pretty standard for their dynamic pricing, so there's no need to reinvent the wheels on these programs. JetBlue miles are worth about 1 cent per mile for JetBlue Mint flights and about 1.4 cents per point for coach flights. And Southwest points are worth between 1.4 to 1.6 cents per point, so those are pretty easy. Now, what I did is I looked at 10 different flight examples for each airline. I looked at 5 domestic and I looked at 5 international. I also looked at both economy and business class flights. And then from those, I looked at the value for domestic and international flights to see if there's any difference in value when redeeming one way or the other. And I looked as a total of the overall value of those miles. I also did look at the same routes and days for all these examples to try and minimize any sort of price variances that could have come up. And starting off with Delta. Now, everyone loves to hate Delta miles. They have no award chart, they've made plenty of no-notice changes, but of the big US 3, I have found their service in my experience to be better than that of American Airlines and United. But their loyalty program is not known for their oversized value. But how bad is the value for Delta miles? And as far as point values are concerned, they were actually pretty stable in their values with a slight amount of variance in their range. And there weren't any really big swings in values in these examples, which is good and bad because that means you can generally assume the value you're going to get from these miles, but with it being fairly stable, the opportunity to get more value from your miles is more unlikely. And for domestic economy flights, the value ranged from about 1.3 to about 1.5 cents per point, with the average being right around 1.4 cents per point. For domestic business class flights, we again see pretty stable values with less variance here ranging from about 1.3 to 1.4 cents per point. And the average cent per point value was slightly lower than that of domestic economy flights, coming in a little under 1.4 cents per point. Now for international travel, this actually just shocked me a little bit, because for international economy flights, the value was lower than that of domestic economy flights. And I would have thought the cent per point value would have actually been higher for international flights, but I guess not. And the range in value was from about 0.8 cents per point up to about 1.4 cents per point for economy. So this was a larger range as well compared to domestic economy flights. But for international economy flights in total, the value received was less than 1.1 cent per point, which is really not that great at all. And for international business class flyers, we saw a range from just about over 1 cent per point to about 1.7 cents per point. So again, we do see a larger range here for international options. But overall, it was still lower than domestic business class options, coming in just over 1.2 cents per point. And the average cent per point value as a whole for economy flights was just about 1.1 cents per point. And for business class, it was about 1.3 cents per point. But in looking at these examples, Delta miles would give you more value for domestic options over international options. Then Delta flash sales can definitely change that, and it can be a great way to use your Delta miles. So if you do find a good flash sale, you might get more value for your Delta miles than these typical values. But in looking at Delta miles, you can see they do hold a pretty stable value, and getting oversized value is really not likely. Then taking a look at American Airlines. Now, American Airlines, they still have award charts listed on their website, but prices again can vary to some degree. And since they still have an award chart with some limits, unlike Delta and United, you can still receive some oversized value in the right situation. And there are some pretty decent ranges for point values as well. For domestic economy flights, cent per point values range from about 1 cent per point up to about 2.3 cents per point, with that 2.3 cent per point value coming from a flight to Hawaii. And the average cent per point value for domestic economy flights was about 1.4 cents per point. For domestic business class flights, the values did range from about 1.1 cent per point up to 2.5 cents per point. But on average, domestic business class flights were getting right around 1.5 cents per point. Now for international flights, do things get better for both economy and business class flyers? Now for international economy flights, we see a range from about 0.8 cents per point up to about 2.5 cents per point. The value to Cancun here for under 1 cent per point is a pretty bad value, but getting 2.5 cents per point to Lisbon is a really solid value for economy flights. And on average, international economy flights were getting 1.6 cents per point, which I actually think is a pretty decent value. And as a whole for American airline miles, economy flyers were getting right around 1.5 cents per point. Then for international business class flights, it ranged from under 1 cent per point up to 4.9 cents per point. Now, any option under 1 cent per point is a bad option, but getting 4.9 cents per point is great, and that's getting oversized value for your miles. And international business class flights averaged right around 2.8 cents per point, which is actually pretty good. And as a whole, American Airlines business class flights averaged just about 2.3 cents per point. But more importantly, I do think this shows that you can get good value from your American airline miles, both in an economy class and some good oversized value for business class flights, especially for international travel. Now lastly, looking at United Airlines. And United was actually far more frustrating to search than Delta and American Airlines, because Delta and American Airlines offer the same flight and times for their paid flights as well as award flights. And with United, that wasn't always the case. There were award options that weren't available for paid flights, and some paid flight options that were not available as an award flight. So I did try to keep these options as close as possible, but it wasn't always possible to have the same flight to determine that cent per point value. Now, United does not publish award charts anymore, and their miles do have some range to their values. For domestic economy flights, we see point values range from about 1.2 cents per point up to 2 cents per point. And again, the highest value here for the economy flights is to Hawaii. But the average domestic economy cent per point value was right around 1.6 cents per point, so this is actually pretty good for economy flights. Then for domestic business class flights, I actually thought it was pretty bad, because the values range from just under 1 cent per point to only about 1.2 cents per point, and that was to Hawaii as well, with the average for domestic business class flights coming in at about 1.1 cents per point. And I think that's a pretty bad value, but this actually does remind me a little bit of JetBlue, where you get a sizable cent per point difference for economy flights over their JetBlue Mint class. Then for international flights, we see economy flight values range from about 0.9 cents per point to about 2 cents per point. And the average cent per point value for international economy flights was just about 1.3 cents per point, which is lower in values than domestic economy options. And as a whole, economy flights average just about 1.4 cents per point. Then for international business class flights, we see options ranging from just about 0.9 cents per point to over 6 cents per point. Now in these examples, the flight from Rome into Johannesburg, the paid options were not the same as the award flights, but I did try to keep the flight times and the number of stops to about the same. But for international business class flights, the average cent per point value was about 2.5 cents per point. Now, while it is about 2.5 cents per point, if you do exclude that crazy outlier of that Johannesburg flight, it drops the overall international business class value to about 1.5 cents per point. Just something to be aware of, because while 6 cents per point is great, all the other options were in the same ballpark, but it does show you that oversized value here is still possible. And as a whole, United business class flights got a value of just about 2 cents per point. Now, we looked at 10 examples for each airline, and this was not meant to be a comparison of which airline miles are better. But you can see that each of these options have different values, and there's going to be different opportunities to get different levels of value from each one of these. Delta miles, they're going to be good for domestic economy flights, maybe even repositioning to larger airports, than using some other miles or maybe cash back for international flights. For business class flyers, Delta miles are not going to be a great option for you with their crazy high pricing and lack of big value. But with a value between 1.1 to 1.3 cents per point, that means a Delta bonus on the gold card of 60,000 points would be worth somewhere between $660 to about $780. So there's still value to be had here. You just need to understand the level of value here is not going to be super size value. Then for American Airlines, you get really good value for international long-haul premium cabin flights. But economy flyers can also get some good value for both domestic and international flights. And if you were to find a web special, the value you get could potentially be even higher. Then for United, you can get some good value for domestic economy flights and maybe even international business class. Domestic business class options is not going to be a great use here since the value was pretty low. And if you are an economy flyer, you can see that many of these overall values are about 1.5 cents per point or less. So a card like the Chase Sapphire Reserve or cash back card could be a good option here over using airline specific miles. And even for some business class flights, the cent per point value is low enough that the Chase Sapphire Reserve or a cash back card would actually be a better option over airline specific miles. And what this should really show you is that you need to run the numbers on value so you can best determine the most efficient way to use your points to get the best redemption possible. So these miles are good and can offer plenty of value when you get bonuses from their credit cards, but you can see that depending on how you travel, earning these miles on the day-to-day may not be the best option for you. And there will be situations where it makes sense to earn these miles, but it won't be all the time. And since these programs are dynamic, that means that they can change their prices whenever they see fit. So I hope you found this helpful in seeing what these miles are worth and how you can use these to determine the value that you can get from these airline miles. So tell me, which of these airline miles do you think are the best? Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in this video. If you want to help support the channel, take a look at the links down in the description below. And if you know somebody that could benefit from this video, feel free to share it with them. And until next time, safe travel and take care.